Alright, hello everyone and welcome to WWE Discussion. I'm your host and WWE TJ's Lucky Doug, and today's episode I'm going to be discussing Monday Night Raw, August 21st, 2023 edition. So WWE have been playing the slow game and building up the card for Payback, but the momentum certainly picked up on this episode of Raw. I think we got 3 matches on the card. Not the best showing for this episode of Raw. Judgment Day booking remains, well, it's not exactly the most exciting thing on Raw. I mean, they're there, but it's kind of rinse and repeat. The return of Kevin Owens is always certainly a nice little thing to see here. Women's division continues to spin its wheels. Gunther and Chad Gable stole the show, and Shinsuke Nakamura cut probably his best promo ever. And yeah, highs and lows and much to be discussed. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get into the discussion, starting with Chad Gable versus Gunther, which, in all honesty, we know there's going to be a rematch, but should it main event Payback? Absolutely. I would 100% say yes, this should be the main event of Payback. They put on the show on Monday Night Raw, and the match sold Gable as a top contender, and the stage is now set. Gable wins via countout. So again, stage is set for a rematch that can be even better than this match was, and it should happen at Payback, and it should be the main event. Seth Rollins versus Nakamura for the world title might be more high profile, but I don't think it has quite as much build as Gunther versus Gable. Ripley versus Rodriguez was just announced, so the story's not big enough. Well, I mean, I guess they've been built into it, but the match was also just announced, and the story not quite, I don't think, as big, or hasn't been going on as long as Gunther versus Gable. While Becky Lynch versus Trish Stratus, well, unfortunately this feud has dragged on for too long for it to earn that spot, so it's kind of, that feud is kind of limping to its conclusion. Gunther, though, when you think about the work he's done with the Intercontinental title, the honor and respect he has brought, the honor with which he has carried the title, and the respect he has brought to it, has elevated it as perhaps the most important title in WWE. And since it looks like the Bloodline will not be at Payback, this is the time to reward Gunther and Gable with a spotlight worthy of their talents. So next up is the tag team champions Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens, who once again were in the main event, and once again fighting off Judgment Day, and once again successfully repelling Judgment Day. So I did see, this isn't a question I came up with, this was something I saw on Bleacher Report, and I thought it'd be a fun little thing to discuss, and that is it time for them to drop, well, Bleacher Report thinks they should drop the titles, but instead I'll flip it and ask the question of, is it time for them to drop the titles? So, Zayn and Owens, healthy, 100% back together again, ready to fight together again, but does the tag team division need them at the top of the card? You think about the rest of the tag team division on Raw, the New Day is back, Alpha Academy on a hot streak. Gable's kind of got his own little singles thing going, but the tag team itself has been doing pretty well. The Street Profits debuting with a new attitude, certainly looking poised for another title run. Even the Viking Raiders and OC would benefit from a chance to feud for tag team gold instead of competing against makeshift tag teams, or trying to feud with makeshift tag teams. Whether it is one of those teams or the Judgment Day, perhaps it is time for fresh faces at the top of the division. Were Zayn and Owens to lose the title soon, they would certainly still have certainly still have stories to tell beyond those titles. Zayn could be wrestling singles matches each week and building himself up as a challenger for the World Heavyweight Championship or even Intercontinental title, depending on how that one plays out at Payback. Or depending on how that one plays out between Gunther and Gable. Now, Owens is a consistent main event presence. Really, that's something that needs to be said there. He and Zayn have had a solid run with the titles, I would say. Granted, injuries kind of slowed their run for a bit, but they might be more important to the Red Brand after letting those tag team titles go. So, just to circle back to the question, is it time for them to drop the titles? I don't think so, but I think there certainly is this valid argument to be made for them dropping the titles. I think if you're going to waste them in a feud with the Judgment Day, then yeah, let the Judgment Day take the titles and then move on. But otherwise, I think maybe since Zayn and Owens are tag team champions, maybe it's time for them to venture over to SmackDown and kind of start feuding with teams and start defending the titles a little bit more. Maybe instead of, rinse and repeat with the Judgment Day, let's try to do something a little bit different. But yeah, I don't think it's time for them to drop the titles. And then WWE continuing to swing and miss with the women's division. There was one match on Raw and it was over in about 3 minutes. The most focused segment of the night for the women's division was Becky Lynch and Trish Stratus. However, that segment was a mess, and that feud overall has lost steam due to bad booking since WrestleMania. There is little excuse for bringing back Indy Hartwell and Candice LeRae as a tag team, only for Rhea Ripley to squash them both. These were two featured women in NXT who have no momentum on Raw. Indy Hartwell had just won the NXT Women's Championship and then had to give it up because she was being drafted to Raw, and there's just been nothing going for her since. Chelsea Green and Piper Niven are in need of new challengers for their women's tag team titles as they squashed the best established tag team on Raw and Chance and Carter, and it would be easy to fix that issue by having Hartwell and Relay shift focus to the tag team division, kind of building them up as a team. There is plenty of time on Raw. You have 3 hours of television to at least give a couple women's matches 10 minutes rather than 2. However, it seems like WWE is currently stuck in its way. I don't know why, but it is. So hopefully there comes a time when they can kind of rectify this issue. But yeah, I mean, the women's division kind of just in a bit of a lull right now, especially on Raw. Rhea Ripley finally has a challenger and will finally be defending her title, but it felt like it's taken way too long to get to this point. Although, yeah, I guess, yeah, things are kind of looking up. Not so much for the women's tag team division, but, well, kind of. I mean, Piper Niven with Chelsea Green is certainly an interesting pairing. But Raquel Rodriguez versus Rhea Ripley for the women's championship, it certainly could be a sign that things are starting to swing in a positive manner. And lastly, Shinsuke Nakamura, let him do more promos in Japanese. It's not that he's a bad English speaker, but it's just the presentation of when he speaks in Japanese, which is his first language. I think it allows him to present himself and sell himself better character-wise than if he tries to cut a promo in English. Again, he can speak solid English, but you can tell that, or you can just kind of tell the difference. When he's speaking in Japanese, it's just better. Again, his English is not bad, but it just doesn't quite look like he's fully comfortable doing that. And he's an all-time great talent. He can be a world champion. I don't know why he hasn't been a world champion. I think perhaps maybe that's because of just not being presented well enough as a champion, or as a potential champion booking wise. And if WWE wants to make him a top star, I don't know why they wouldn't. He needs to be at his best, and the only way you can have him at his best is if he is allowed to cut promos in Japanese and not necessarily try to do battle with somebody like Seth Rollins on the mic, who is a more natural English speaker. English is Rollins' first language. But yeah, Nakamura versus Rollins is set, and certainly the story Seth told about his back, I think that's a legitimate thing. Not quite sure, but if that is the case, then hey, that back injury could certainly be a way to have Rollins drop the title. Nakamura gets his first world title, and Seth can go off and address his back injury if it is indeed legitimate. Again, I think it is. So I'm very curious to see how this one feels out. I think the back injury certainly does kind of make it a toss-up in terms of who will retain. So in conclusion, this week's Raw did a lot of legwork when it came to events and storylines, but only a couple matches stood out. Gunther versus Gable, best bout of the night, and there is a chance it ends up being the best second WWE TV all week. The main event was also a solid performance with 6 guys who have helped carry Raw for the past several months, and seeing Tozawa get a win was certainly a big highlight, but unfortunately that will likely lead to nothing. With Payback less than 2 weeks away, WWE still has some work to do. Only 3 matches have been booked so far, so expect to see more added during SmackDown this Friday and next week leading in to the Premium Live event. And with that will conclude this episode of WWE Discussion. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit that like button down below.